The content you're about to enjoy comes from the archives of The Best You. We're devoted to the very best in personal development, with a magazine and resources dedicated to inspiring and changing people's lives. At The Best You, we work with the world's leading writers and trainers on the evolution of the self, and people whose journeys have been affected by their work and words. For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co.
Morning. My name is Warren Cass. It's the first time I've done Best You. I'm quite pleased to be here to have a conversation. I'm around for a couple of days. One thing I absolutely encourage is if anything that I say inspires an idea or you want clarification on an aspect of something that I've mentioned, I'm exhibiting it for 2 days. Come and have a conversation with me and we'll brainstorm and see how we can contextualize what I'm talking about specifically for your situation, circumstances. Plenty of time, make use of it. So a quick point. Who am I? So I'm a public speaker. I've been speaking now for over a decade and internationally. Normally the audience I speak to is an entrepreneurial kind of business audience, so good to see some hands going up from a business point of view. My book came out this last year, Influence, which enjoyed a little bit of success, went to number 1 in the W.H. Smith non-fiction charts, which was a lovely surprise. I run an organisation, though, which is all about helping small businesses in the UK win more customers and attract more clients and retain the existing clients, but also to massively save money on their overhead. So we actually help 750,000 businesses in the UK across 28 different platforms reduce overheads and win new customers, essentially. And a little brand, which is more my philanthropic brand of Champions of Small Business, is really all about adding value to the SME space, because the stats are astonishing. 500,000 businesses are started as a minimum every single year, and quite a lot of people fail every single year too. And I don't believe we're inventing new ways to fail. I think knowledge just isn't being shared, and that's a big thing that we look to achieve with Champions, is help people overcome. Of course, there's other reasons. Some people are really, really good at what they do, just not very good at selling it. Some people are just undercapitalized. There's lots and lots of reasons why things don't necessarily achieve. But I believe all of these things can be solved with good influence skills and good strategies for the right relationships. So a little bit about me. I'm a father of 2. My son's just moved to London, actually. He's just moved to West London. He's doing a drama degree. And we did an escape room recently, just between Christmas and New Year. So this was us escaping Hannibal Lecter. This is Eddie, my little cat I rescued, which was a feral cat as a kitten. We found him 4 weeks old a year ago. And West Ham fan. And my guilty passion is I love playing polo, riding horses. And this all started because my daughter for about 10 years had been saying, "Dad, will you learn to ride?" And I'd basically said, "Yeah, one day. So about 2-3 years ago, in secret, for 2 months, I learned to ride, so she had no idea I was doing it. And the very first time she actually got to know was she was off on a hack with some people I'd organised. And, of course, I came round the corner on a horse too. And that moment, the two of us galloping side by side on the first day she even knew I could ride was just amazing. Anyway, a little bit about me, and that'll become clear why I'm sharing that as well quite shortly. Why did I write the book? Well, I've been talking on the subject of influence for over a decade, and actually the 2 main books on influence, one was written by Dale Carnegie in the 1930s, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion was written by Cialdini, but again it was written in the 80s. Since then, we've had a whole digital revolution. The internet was born and a whole load of other things happened. So it was important to me to not only write a book which basically made it applicable to today. The other thing is, most of these books, I believe, are written by academics, and they're written from a very academic perspective. And I wanted to write something which was layman's terms and practical and easy to implement now. So that's why the book came about. And as I say, I think we've done about 12,000 copies since June, which is good going. Thanks to Best You for having me. Lovely to be here for the 2 days. A little bit of housekeeping. If you are Twitter or social media inclined, that's who I am. If you're going to take a photo, though, can you put the slim filter on? I'm very conscientious. But no, it'd be great to shout out, ask me questions on social media if you want to, and we can answer it and connect there. If you like my slides and you want to have access to them afterwards, just make sure I've got your card at the end, and I'll make sure you've got those by the middle of next week, with some other supporting material too. So let's get started. I'm here to talk about influence, and there's a few things I want to give you some practical things that you can go away and take away straight away today. But first, the question is, what does influence mean to you? So just for 2 seconds, indulge me. If you could just turn to the person next to you and what does influence mean to you? Literally, just 1 minute. So if I just call you back, is that anybody got a definition they're going to be happy to share? Got a definition you're happy to share? What does influence mean to you?
Your ability to have an impact on other people to reach a goal, I suppose.
So it's very, very similar, yeah. Change was the other option I had over here, helping people to make change. Influence for me is about affecting an outcome, and it's without having to force it. It's that natural process we go through to get something to a conclusion, and we're all influenced all of the time, from the moment we wake till the moment we sleep. From the mood our partner is in when we wake up in the morning to the micro expression of somebody on the tube as we're coming into work on our commute. We're all influenced all of the time. And it can be the most subtle of things. I mean, research has even shown that if you witness an act of kindness for the 2 hours that follow, you're likely to be more kind. Massively empathetic creatures that absorb everything around us. And there are so many messages we're bombarded with just from a marketing perspective every day. That's influence. But I believe that those who concentrate on building their influencing skills have more solid friendships, more solid relationships with loved ones, have more solid relationships with colleagues at work, and certainly have more solid relationships with clients and customers. And it's just about I'm going to come through some of the tips, so it's just about going through and understanding communication from another person's perspective. That can be as simple as that from an influencing point of view. Building rapport in those early stages of a conversation, that's all influence. And that can be as simple as just synchronizing yourself with the person you're talking to. Anybody done NLP here? So a couple of people at NLP. So even little things like if I met you for the first time, I can build rapport with you just by blinking at the same pace that you're blinking at, or with a smile on my face, or from a breathing perspective, or understanding the language you want to use and using the same sort of language. All of this constitutes towards influence. But before I go into that in any detail, because it's all of those things, what I want to do is just contextualize a little bit of why influence is important today and the change that we see all around us. Because society is changing, and that's the understatement you'll hear, the biggest understatement you'll hear over this next 2 days if you're here for the 2 days. So why? Well, just from a business perspective, over 40% of the organizations that were the top of the Fortune 500 in the year 2000 were no longer there in 2010. So we live in time of massive disruption anyway when it comes to business. So an example, they're having their troubles in London right now, but Uber's the biggest fleet of cars in the world without owning a single car. Even the driverless cars that are taking place with the trial in the US are owned by Volvo, not by Uber. So that's one big disruption. It's all driven by the app. Airbnb, biggest portfolio of accommodation and property in the world, don't own a single property. And there's even apps for doing what Airbnb do in the daytime, what they do in the nighttime. So it's all about people sweating their assets now. Access, not ownership, is the kind of key word around apps. But multi-million-pound, multi-billion-pound industries are being created just from access. Snapchat has been recently valued at something like 27 billion, something stupid like that. And it's just an app which disposes of messages. Okay, tells story and does various other things. But there's a whole generation, or in fact, there's multi-generations that aren't even using it, and it's worth that much money. That's just the disruption that we see all around us. And even Tesla have kind of taken their products to new levels. It's not just about the car. It's now the trucks. It's the Hyperloop, where they're looking to replace rail transport. It's the house battery they're developing so people can come off the grid with their solar panels. We're seeing innovation and disruption all the time. But sometimes it doesn't go to plan. Sometimes it simply doesn't work. Google is up there for a very specific example. Shouldn't Yell have been Google? Since 1956, Yell owned the directory space. We searched for products and services using a copy of the Yellow Pages. 1956 was the Brighton and Hove directory, and they spread across 4 continents. But there was nobody in the business saying, what's around the corner? What's coming next? And as a result, come the birth of the internet, they were a brand that lost millions and millions over that decade. In fact, Yell.com wasn't even started till the year 2000. How behind the curve was that? And Kodak, another example. In Kodak, they had people in the business who were encouraged to bring in futurists, and they asked the simple question, what's the future of photography? And so all of these people within Kodak were avidly listening to futurists who came in and they said, the future of photography is digital. And they said, that's not what we wanted to hear, you're fired. And as a result, it's a brand that lost. They invented digital photography, but they failed to understand we'd all be walking around with cameras in our pockets, digital cameras in our pockets, and the marketplace would change. And I tell you all of this because I think it's a massive mistake to not have at least one eye on the future. Whatever your business, industry, job, whatever you do, to not be considering what's coming next is a mistake in my humble opinion. Henry Ford was somebody who actually employed people specifically for that task. He used to have people ask the question, who are those people in the corner office with their socks and shoes off, feet on the table? And they were his dreamers. They were the people that innovated and thought about what's coming next. So this is a quote that's quite often falsely attributed to Darwin, but it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most adaptable to change.
For complimentary resources from my book, my complimentary e-course, The Power of the Question, or recommended reads, go to www.thequestion.com/resources. For more information on my coaching or mentoring, go to www.bernardo-moya.com.
I'm going to really hit this point home now for you around communication, because this is what influence means. There's a barometer for how long it takes for a product or service to hit 50 million users. So for the telephone, it was 75 years. For the radio, it was 38. For the TV, it was 13. For the iPod, it was 4. The web did it in 3. Facebook did it in 2. The iPhone did it in 3 months. Now, if you think of it, every single one of those is a new innovation in communication that makes the next innovation quicker and easier and more, have more impact. And just to show this, where we live in the age of the app now, so we've seen brands come from nowhere and build multi-million-pound businesses. Angry Birds did it in 30 days. So it's just an indication of how quick, if you've got the right product, service, innovation, access to information, whatever, we've got the tools now to get it out there quicker than we ever had before. I'm looking at a mixed age group audience. How many people recognize the fellow on the screen? A couple of us. And maybe a couple that are lying, but the rest. So in 1980, this was the cheesiest game show on British television. Okay, this is Dusty Bin. This particular TV show commanded audiences every single week of about 18 million viewers. Biggest thing on TV today is Bake Off, I'm a Celebrity, Dancing on Ice, X Factor, whatever. Their biggest audience is on their final. And the biggest audience they get on their final is about 13 million viewers. So why the difference? Well, back then, we had a scarcity of choice, but we had an abundance of attention. So we had 4 TV channels in 1980. It's before the remote control was even mainstream. So if you were sat watching television, you were captive. The only 2 channels that showed adverts, you were captive and you watched adverts. People didn't walk up to the TV and channel hop their 4 channels. So if you were a big brand looking to influence consumers, it was perfect. But you had to have deep pockets. It cost. And you fast forward to today, we've got more channels than we know what to do with. We fast forward everything because we don't really want to watch 15 minutes of adverts for every hour, do we? And actually, if you look at the trend with younger generation, it's around smaller attention spans. It's YouTube clips over 2-hour films. So information, the way we disseminate information and share is now bite-sized chunks and smaller amounts. And this is applicable to anybody running a business too. So we've changed in those ways too. You'll notice actually advert breaks are shorter now on television, but not only that, where their prime revenue comes from is the people who are sponsoring programs, not advertising, so they get to put their logo up and their branding up at the beginning and the end of every break. And typically, you'll see the hashtag associated with it, because everybody has realized now it's not a broadcast medium anymore, it's an engagement medium. You know, whatever you might watch on television, how many of you actually go and talk on the hashtag beyond that? They want people to be part of the conversation. That's where the longer opportunity is. And there's a lot of people talk about millennials, and I'm not going to overly bore you with millennials. It's a subject done to death. But what I do want to just make a point is why it's important, if you're running a business, to consider different demographics. So from a millennial generation, this is the basic breakdown. But, you know, when you consider that the world's population has doubled since 1980, meaning half of the world's population are 38 and younger, and they are the most powerful consumer group, particularly online, then there is a reason why I need you to understand this, particularly if you're running a business. So, first of all, millennial attitudes. From a work perspective, millennials feel the need to be a real part of what they're doing. They need to be able to. They feel like they need to be making a contribution. It's much more important to them. Only 8% of millennials in the US work for the big Fortune 500 companies. The rest choose to start their own businesses or work for smaller businesses where they're connected to the entrepreneur at the helm and they feel like they're connected to the why of the organization. But many just go and start their own businesses because they can. We live in that age. From a marriage, kids, and debt and mortgage point of view, again, a different story. Back in the 1970s, the average age for marriage, mortgage, and kids was about 23 years old. Now it's about 36 years old. So it's happening later and later. And again, that has a bit of an impact. From a religion point of view, actually, in most Western societies, the trend is we're becoming much more atheistic. But that's varied. Even in America this year, a recent survey done at the beginning of January shows that less than 50% of Americans consider themselves white Christian. That figure was massive for many, many, many decades and untouchable, and it's reducing too. So we're changing. We are culturally changing too. From a politics point of view, millennials are more informed and more misinformed at the same time. And so more engaged politically is, I think, the term I'd prefer to use. And from a consumerism point of view, less brand loyal. So, look, the point is we live in a big multicultural society, and that's only going to become more so as we move forward. And the key point I kind of want to make with this is, if you are running a business or looking to run a business, or if you're working with an organization and you use one tone of voice when you're communicating, chances are you're not talking to everybody. If your customer base is multi-demographic and you use one tone of voice, you're not talking to everybody. So we live in an age now where it's very easy to personalize what we talk. Marketing should be personalized wherever possible nowadays. It's about engaging with individuals, not just mass broadcast. Technology's changed too. The cloud has re-engineered our relationship with technology. Big data, even for small businesses, is about being much more intelligent with all the different systems that we have, so they talk to each other. Mobilization has meant we've broken the shackles of the desk and we can work pretty much anywhere in the world. I had a really good Skype call with a guy 2 days ago, and he uprooted his business and moved to Bali. He runs a whole business from Bali. Just what a fantastic thing to do. I've got another friend who uprooted his business. In fact, it's a London-based business called Hipsters, Hackers and Hustlers. And he uprooted the whole thing and runs it from the Caribbean now. So he's got good Wi-Fi and all of his meetings are Skype, and he's still moving his concept forward. We live in that age. And I believe social media has fundamentally changed the way we communicate. And all of this is a big part. From 2014, there were more mobile devices than there were people in the world. In fact, you are more likely to have a smartphone than a working toilet, as current stats. Typical mobile phone users check their phone 150 times a day. I was with my physio recently, having run a marathon, and he said the biggest problem he's getting right now, it's particularly in teenagers, it's upper back and lower neck. We're not designed to walk around like this all day, and that's what people are doing. It's causing all sorts of other problems. But there is a reason why I'm showing you this. But before I do that, according to Facebook, we're talking about toilets, If you're a man, you're more likely to sit down for the toilet now just so you can check your phone. This is the age we live in. Hasn't it gone mad? I play a game with my friends when we go to dinner. We all put our phones face down in the middle of the table, and the first person to reach for the phone pays the bill. It means actually we're back to engaging and having conversations. But I encourage you to do the same. In fact, I was in a restaurant recently where as you walked in, there was a sign and it said, if you leave your mobile phone with us for the duration of your meal, you get 10% off. What a great concept. 4.7 billion app users by the end of this year. The App Store is being used like a search engine. So again, if you're running a business, I encourage you to think about how you might be able to use an app. When apps were really very new, we had a member in the West Midlands, and she was a coach. And she spent about £800 developing her app. But within the first 4 weeks, she ran 2 coaching clients, which more than paid for it. So the App Store is being used like a search engine. I absolutely encourage you to think about how you might use it effectively for your business. The attention spans were recently recorded at about 8 seconds. That's 1 second less than a goldfish. That's the age that we live in. So from your own point of view, if you've got people who are potentially looking for your products and services and hitting your website and it's not mobile optimized, they're just going to navigate away and you have lost them. So again, from an influence online point of view, I encourage you to adapt. So how many people have their own website here? Show of hands. Their own website. Yeah. So the thing I would encourage you, if your website isn't mobile focused or if you don't have an app, consider it. We are really impatient. It used to be that we gave a website 2 to 3 seconds before we were making a decision whether we would navigate away. Our attention spans are actually getting smaller all the time. In fact, the attention spans were recently recorded at about 8 seconds. That's 1 second less than a goldfish. That's the age that we live in. So from your own point of view, if you've got people who are potentially looking for your products and services and hitting your website and it's not mobile optimized, they're just going to navigate away and you have lost them. So again, from an influence online point of view, I encourage you to adapt. And video as well. Think about how you can adapt video. Did you know in the last 24 hours alone, there's been more original content uploaded to YouTube than the top 4 American TV channels have aired since the 1930s? We are huge consumers of this data. We're huge creators too. So what can you do to get your message? If you've got your own websites, you should have video on the front page. In my opinion, keep it to about 45 seconds so it's really impactful. And the point of the video on any homepage should be to drive somebody to the next page, to the next action they take on your website. So think a little bit more focused along those lines. And another good reason for video relates to one of my favourite geek jokes, which is, where's the best place to hide a dead body? On the 3rd page of Google. So think about your own products and services, your own even viewing habits. When you're looking for something and you don't find what you're looking for on page 1 of Google, what do? If you're like the majority of us, we change our search terms and we move on. So it's never been more important to be found for the stuff you want to be found by. Most people, when they're looking for a product or service, they're looking for very specifically for that. And then there's typically geography or something else that just makes it a little bit easier to narrow down and provide context. So again, video will help you get found. Video is something that is highly optimized. It's the 2nd biggest search engine on the planet, owned by the 1st. So definitely something to take advantage of. So with all of that backdrop I've just given you, point number 1 is become a student of change. If you do nothing else from this talk, when you get home, type into YouTube or to Google, what's the future of, and put your profession, job, industry, whatever, into that bracket and just see what comes up. But keep an eye on it. So I think it's fairly consistent for most speakers and for most authors. We have golden rules. Do you have it, Sophie? Do you have an acronym? That's it. You've got to have your acronym. It's in the rule book. If we don't have our acronyms, we're shunned upon by the rest of the community, and it can be a very sad time. So with mine for influence, I've picked the acronym of PICKY. So P is around people, and this is around the relationships that we have inside and outside of business, but it's also about who the key influencers are in turn that we can associate ourselves with. I is around image, so that's not just about what we wear, it's how we portray ourselves online, what our websites look like, what our brands look like, and how that reflects on us. C is around communication, which is both verbal and obviously spoken, and there's a whole load of points that I go into a bit more detail on this. By the way, if any of these, as I said, you specifically want to ask questions about, come to the stand. I'm there for 2 days. I'll happily work with you on all of it. K is around knowledge. This is demonstrating expertise. I'm presuming if you're starting a business, all of you are experts in your field. I'm presuming. But how do you get that knowledge out there? How do you demonstrate it to other people too? And why for me is all about the values of great influencers and the things that we can adopt. And I'm a great believer in modeling successful behavior. So if you can find the type of people who've achieved what you're looking to achieve, how can you model their attributes? And it's really never been more important to start thinking about building your network. And by the way, that process starts right now. Even if you've just sold a business and are looking to start something new in a year's time, you don't stop knowing people when your circumstances change. Having that kind of safety net of people that you can call upon for critical feedback on the ideas that you have, for the incubator, for just friendship maybe. But there's so much that comes from networking. I think it's a vastly misunderstood thing. Most people, when they go to networking events, go to lots of events once. Well, that's just really shallow relationships. There's no depth there at all. I absolutely recommend, if networking is a key part of your strategy, that you find 1 or 2 groups where the people in the group resonate, whether there's relevance to what you do in your business, but keep going. Form deep relationships with them. It's a really misunderstood thing. If we've got a little bit of time at the end, I might even show you a little bit around the psychology of a room when you go to a networking event. That's quite useful and fun. A friend of mine, Andy Lapata, wrote a book called Death Came Third. So just out of interest, how many people have been to a networking event here? Okay. How many people enjoy it? Okay, about half of you. There is a reason for that. We're made up of introvert and extrovert energy, and introverts are drained when they go to networking events. And the way they re-energize themselves is take themselves to the side and have a bit of alone time and re-energize. Extroverts wade into that environment, and that's how they get energized. So we're very different in lots of different ways. But they did some research on people's biggest fears, and death came third. In first place was public speaking, and second place was walking into a room full of strangers. And if you've ever been to a networking event where you've had to stand up and deliver 60 seconds, those 2 things are apparently worse than death, and it's no surprise that people actually avoid it if they can. But I encourage you to get out your comfort zones and start taking your networking seriously. In fact, if you can take this to the next level and consider how you involve masterminding, the concept of masterminding has... I was first made aware of this when I was 17 years old, and it was Christmas Eve, and I was in a pub with my friend and his father. And his father was a very successful businessman, and he said to me, "If there's one book you want to read, it's this one." And it was Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. And he said, if you really want to be successful, go and read this book. So 17 was quite a few years back. He said, "I would give you my copy, but if you're hungry enough, you'll go and buy your own." Of course, I had it by Boxing Day. And it was the first time I was introduced to the concept of mastermind. And it's actually something which I now rely very heavily on in my business and surround myself with really good people. And I encourage you all to do the same, absolutely. Now, it doesn't have to be expensive. You can go to some mastermind groups where they charge you £1,000 a month just to be part of the mastermind. I would encourage you to invite 5, 10 people that you really respect once a month to a pub even, just to talk about the issues that you're facing right now within your business. And that's really, really useful. Just have dinner together and talk about the issues. It doesn't have to be complex. I even take this stuff a little bit further because once a year, 50 plus of us go skiing, all business owners. In fact, I have to give you a shout out again, don't I? This year was Val d'Isère. And I can tell you, this is an environment where people pitch to each other. This is an environment where people share with each other. The conversations that take place on chairlifts are massively powerful. This year, I think I came back with probably 5 times my investment before I even stepped foot off the stage, just because of the people in the room with the right context, sharing, but connecting on shared experiences, not just turning up at a random event, feeling slightly awkward and talking to each other. So whatever your net ski is, by the way, if you're skiers and you want to ask me about next year, do so. But whatever your thing is, it's about trying to connect with people on a human level.
For more information on collaborating, partnering, sponsoring, supporting, or speaking at any of our events or finding out more about our legacy clubs, go to www.thebestyou.co.
If you're interested in finding out more about the amazing content we have, please go to www.thebestyou.online and get your 14-day free trial now.
In the book, I cover another concept around credibility by association, which I think is really powerful. So within each of your industries and professions, there'll be people who are already pioneering, already out there. And the story I like to tell to really demonstrate this is the chap on the left is a chap by the name of Jack Black, obviously not the Hollywood actor. But during the 80s, he was a social worker, but he had a real passion for personal development. So he invested in himself and he developed his own content. And when he was ready to launch, he took on a £10,000 loan and he employed Sir John Harvey Jones to come and stand next to him on stage in Glasgow in front of 2,000 Glaswegian business owners. Overnight, he was the guru that works with Sir John Harvey Jones and built a multi-million-pound business because he understood the power of having the right people stood next to you, lending that credibility. Now, again, it's never been so easy to create things like joint ventures now, to identify the people who are already talking to the customers you want to have dialogue with. So consider this as a concept. I flew up to meet Jack when I started an event management business in 2003. And I basically phoned him and said, I'd love to have a chat and see if we can do something. And he said, no problem, I'm in Glasgow, come up and meet me. So I flew up from Bristol to Glasgow. And I met him at the hotel right next to the airport. And he asked me a question straight away, which was, why are you here? What's the reason why you're here? And I honestly, very naively, had turned up with an open mind and no fixed agenda. And when I told him that, I could see his eyes roll. And I thought, damn, come prepared. I've never made that mistake since. But bless him, he gave me an hour of his time. And then he left. And within about 5 minutes, I had somebody approach me and say, excuse me, can I buy you a coffee? I just noticed you were talking to Jack Black. I'm intrigued to know a little bit more about you. Credibility by association again at play. I spent the morning with that chap. We actually flew back on the same Bristol flight with EasyJet. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, we did business together. And it all happened because he saw I was with somebody he respected. This is the power of this stuff. But it is about, we're known by the company we keep, and it's about finding those people and keeping them close. And I'm not going to go into psychometrics. I haven't got time to go into psychometrics, but I do want to make a couple of points. How many people here have done a DISC profile or a psychometrics test? So I really encourage you to do this. By the way, if you want to come and speak to me afterwards, I can even give you a free profile, an online assessment with something called NSIZE, which is based on DISC. But I really encourage you to do this. I think it's really important to know who you are and your communication style. But the more you know about things like that, the more you get to observe and identify other people's too. So people are typically put into, it's a bit more complex and I'm about to summarize it, but people are typically put into 4 sections. And that gives their natural traits around communication. Now, there is a very quick and easy way of typically finding the right place for the right person. That's by asking 2 questions. The first question, do they appear introvert or extrovert? Do they appear to be more concerned about people or about tasks? You ask those 2 questions, you can put them into the right context. And putting them into the right place means that you can suddenly adjust the way that you communicate to be more effective to them. We're talking about influencing here. So I typically sit in the extrovert, people-orientated, outgoing, enthusiastic, spirited, etc., which means I like a good yarn. I like to tell a story and have a little bit of fun. But if I'm talking to typically the accountant-type profile who's detail and facts and sticking to the point, I do their head in. So unless I can identify those people and adjust the way I communicate, I'm only going to have a 50% hit rate at best. So from your own point of view, I encourage you to have a look at these things. As I say, I've got a free test for you. A very good friend of mine, though, has a small book which is worth reading, where he puts everybody into an animal type. And the point he typically makes is, whilst you might want to own which animal you are, it's not about being the animal, it's about being the zookeeper. And it's how you actually learn to communicate with all of the animals. So think Dr. Dolittle. If you're interested in that book, it's a chap by the name of Nigel Risner. And the book it's called It's a Zoo Around Here. And it's a very thin book, but it really gets the point across beautifully. So point 2 is really about becoming a student of people. and collecting the right people within your organization. Okay, I've got a limited time left, so I'm just going to whiz through a couple of other points which give you something practical. Listening is obviously massively important. I'll tell you a story. I was having my hair cut recently, and the lady who runs the hairdressing salon where I went to school with, so I've been going to her for years. And they have a philosophy in this particular salon that they share the tips. But they have one or two people who outperform all of the rest when it comes to attracting tips. And they couldn't understand why. So she asked me, she said, "When next time you're in, can you just have a look and see what's going on, what they're doing differently?" And for me, it was very, very obvious. The people who were getting the most tips were the people who were genuinely showing interest in the people in the chair, asking lots and lots of questions, understanding their lives, really being interested. And the moment they knew that and were able to then share that kind of piece of information with everybody, everybody became really good at getting tips. And those that were doing it before completely without knowing, suddenly with knowing, performed up another gear. They did a social experiment where they took somebody who flew from New York to London, transatlantic, and he was set a task. For the whole of this flight, you've got to keep the person next to you talking without revealing a single piece of information about yourself. Now, for 7 hours, can you imagine how difficult that is? 7 hours keeping somebody else talking and not saying a word about who you are. When they landed, they asked the person he was speaking to, "How was your flight?" "It was amazing." "What about the person next to you?" "Oh, what a guy, really nice chap." "What was his name?" Couldn't tell you at all. Couldn't tell you at all. So there's a couple of things that we like as human beings. We love it when people are interested in us. We love it when people ask us questions. We love it when people use our names. Our name is like, it's like dopamine injection right there. So knowing simple tips and techniques like this, when you're next out there talking to customers or your friends or family, just being more interested, asking more questions, using the mouth less than the ears, is a great way of influencing. We're empathetic creatures. I mentioned this earlier on. Recent research has shown that we're more empathetic than we think. And actually, our brains synchronize much, much quicker than we think. They had some studies done in Stanford in the US, and they had people set in fMRI scans, and so couldn't see each other. One person would be talking, just telling stories and talking about themselves. The other person was just listening. And what happens very quickly is brainwaves start to synchronize. And the most fascinating part of the research shows that it goes one step beyond synchronizing, where actually it becomes almost predictive. So the brainwaves almost become predictive. And this is the point I'm really trying to make, is that it's about connecting with individuals, not just talking at them. Asking questions is a great way of understanding context, but if your mouth is open, you're simply not learning. And context really matters. So whereas tools like NLP will give you tools around things like rapport, psychometrics might give you a better understanding of people, contextual marketing is something that I think is really important too. Now, typically it's used as a digital marketing term. Anybody here heard it? Contextual marketing? No? So contextual marketing is the simple premise that when we make a buying decision, there is a context to it. So if I was going to buy a new car, it could be that I'm having a midlife crisis and I want a convertible. It could be there's a new child in the family, God forbid, and I need more space. It could be I've had a crash and I need a quick replacement. Whatever, there's a context. So as a salesperson, if I can tap into somebody's context, I've got a much bigger chance of making a sale. Now, where this gets really interesting, a good friend of mine, Grant LeBoeuf, did a contract with Stringfellows in London. And they went and they had a look at traffic, and they were able to make some assumptions. So if somebody's on the Stringfellows website at 11 o'clock on a Friday night from a mobile IP address, we can maybe guess the context relates to right now. They're probably looking for directions, dress code, price on the door, whatever. The context is now. If somebody's looking at the Stringfellows website at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning from a static IP address, chances are they're probably planning an event for the future. So if the message that we present is contextual to the need of the person visiting the site, we've got a bigger chance of converting them. And sure enough, with Stringfellows, they saw 30% more engagement almost immediately just by contextualizing the message. But that's contextual marketing in a kind of digital framework. I think context is important for everything that we do in life. We could have a conversation about your business or even your potential need for my services. But unless I understand what the context is for you, I've got less chance. Now, if you couple that with the fact that I might be able to build rapport with you, we might have, we might both have excellent communication skills. I might understand your natural communication style from a psychometrics point of view. You bundle all this together and you're starting to really cook when it comes to influence. So point 3 is to listen. Some of you will have heard the term B2B or B2C. I actually think it's H to H now. It doesn't matter what size business you are. If you're out there engaging, particularly around social media, it's individuals within organizations that connect. It's all about human to human. And so a quick thing to illustrate this is one of my old business cards. And it was all really about finding common ground with people when you're at an event. So if you're at a networking event, rather than just talking business, trying to connect on a human level with people. A couple of lessons came out of this. So first of all, it made small talk and conversation very, very easy. But particularly when you found common things, it really accelerated trust and rapport because you had common things. Second lesson was don't let your staff print your business cards because that's what the buggers did. I forgave, and it was a bit of fun. But finding the ways to connect. So on your own websites, what do you do to actually reveal a bit of yourself? Do you remember at the outset of this presentation, I showed you my wife and kids, my cat, West Ham, horse riding, whatever. I told you some things about me, and one or two of you in the audience might think, oh, we've got that in common, and we might have a conversation about that later. It doesn't matter. It's about connecting on a human level. Another point which relates... many years ago, when my kids were this sort of size, we were coming back from Euro Disney. And we were on the Eurostar. It's a good 2-hour plus train journey. And my wife is an introvert, so she wanted to put her head in a book and read in the corner. And she was exhausted from the 2 days at a theme park, so she said, you're going to entertain the kids in the train, which I realised was actually an instruction, not a question. And so that's what happened. So I was entertaining my kids. So before you know it, I started to attract other people's children too. So I'm entertaining lots of people's kids on this train journey. And about 20 minutes outside of London, one of the other fathers said to me, I'm really intrigued. What is it you actually do? And it started a conversation. About 2 weeks later, we actually did some business together from a 20-minute conversation because I entertained his children. Now, why is that? Why did that happen? He could see my values. He could see what I was, quite generous, letting other people come and have conversations with me. I was demonstrating my values. The trust part of that equation was completely accelerated. There was no formality behind it at all. So demonstrating your values is the quick thing I want to say here. Again, we're living in a time now where human-to-human conversations are taking place, but we're connecting around heart issues. And the last thing I want to leave you with, really, is around telling your own personal stories. Again, I know we had mixed age group put their hands up earlier on when I did Dusty Bin, so it strikes me only half of you are going to know what Jack and Ori was. But this was a storytelling TV program in the sort of 70s, 80s. And really what I'm encouraging you to do is to tell your own stories. So a friend of mine has a major client in London who are contract cleaners. And when the business started, the owner of the business was out there doing all of the pitches. And the owner of the business was winning 4 out of 5 contracts that he went for. Had an astonishing hit rate when it came to tendering for new business. As the business grew, he employed sales teams. And as sales teams came on board, they went out and started pitching for the business. And that hit rate went down from 4 out of 5 to maybe 2, maybe 3 tops. And they were trying to understand the difference. And it was very obvious. When he was pitching for business, because he's utterly connected to the why in his own business, he was telling his story. He was sharing all the different lessons that he'd learned. And people were, because we're empathetic creatures, coming on board with that story. When his staff were going in, of course, they weren't connected to the why of the business. We taught them to share their own stories, why they like working where they're working. The type of clients they're working, tell their client stories too, but they become masters at storytelling. The moment they did that, they started to win more contracts. Still never quite as good as the owner of the business. That's to be expected. But I encourage you all to become storytellers. Every conversation you have at events like this, what is the story that demonstrates your values, that shows off who you are at a human level, gets empathy, and helps you connect? So a couple of the key points that I've talked about today. One was become a student of change. We want you to become a student of people too, and that starts with being a student of yourself. If you want that end-size psychometric profile, come and speak to me at the end. I'll happily share it along with the slides. Listening. Become excellent at asking questions. Use people's names, but not so it looks menacing. You're not at the end of every sentence, but certainly drop people's name into a conversation and show real genuine interest. Connect on a human level. Don't be all about business. If you go to a networking event and the first thing you're doing is thrusting a card into somebody's hand and telling them about features and benefits, you're doing it wrong. Demonstrate your values at all time and tell your stories. They are the simple ingredients for quick influence for people, quickly building rapport and trust and being able to take business through to the next level. I do have my book here today. I'm doing a signing in the bookstore at 1 o'clock, but I've got books on my stand as well. If you fancy a copy, they retail at $10.99. You can have them, a show offer for today for £10. And just so you know, if you're interested in taking your own strategy forward, there's a 50-page A4 guide on my website that's free to download, and it takes all of the questions that I ask at the end of every single chapter to contextualize what I'm talking about for your circumstances and helps you actually go and build your own strategy. But that's free on the website to take advantage of. I've got a little bookmark as well if you want it. And in the next 2 weeks, I'm actually in a studio recording a series of Udemy lectures. And the very first one I'm going to do is a much more thorough version of this talk where I'm time restricted. And I'll happily send that out to you for free as well, so you can watch again in a bit more detail. But my name is Warren Cass. You have been the most attractive audience I've spoken to today. Congratulations. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Thank you.
For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co.